Welcome to Rauta's Classic Reviews. Today's band comes from France and it's a band called Deathspell Omega. You might have heard of it. This one is Infernal Battles from 2000. This CD version is around 2003, which is around when I got my copy. And why I decided to go with this early material? Well, two reasons. First of all, this album is now 20 years old. And secondly, I've always been more of a fan of this old rawer style of Deathspell Omega's black metal. Now, it's a curious band because many people are divided when it comes to Deathspell Omega's material. Some, like me, the ones that probably jumped on early on to the bandwagon of Deathspell Omega, kind of like the raw, older black metal by the band, whereas some people kind of like their more later on progressive style, which is then again very, very different from the early years. And I understand it. Those later year albums are very different band. I mean, altogether when it comes to songwriting and probably lyrical context and all that stuff. But overall, it feels like the band is having definitely at least two different eras. Not only because of the musical style, but also because of lineups. Now, I decided to pick Infernal Battles being the debut one over the second album. So let's take a look at the band on Metal Archives while I'll tell you a little bit more. So some people remember Deathspell Omega as kind of a Herilorn side project. That is, if you take a look at the members list and click this Herilorn link here, you will find out that Herilorn existed a few years before Deathspell Omega. However, they did only one full-length album and then some smaller releases before disbanding. So that's basically when Deathspell Omega really took over, even though they already had their demo in 1999 and 2000 album and all that stuff. But as we go to more forward with the list, you will quickly see that Deathspell Omega has always been very active. I mean, they have created quite a few full lengths, surely, but more than that, they have created these EPs and then some compilations made of these between. And the quality has changed, and obviously also the approach to black metal has obviously changed. You can even see it with the titles. I mean, early on it was like Infernal Battles, Inquisitors of Satan, kind of like traditional second wave or even first wave black metal titles. But as Monumentum came out 2004 and 10 Fas Ite and later on Paracletus and so forth, you kind of see the different in names and style, obviously. So they kind of go hand in hand. And one could say there is some link to Zach Schul being one of the early members parting ways with the band earlier on 2000s. But here we are to talk about Infernal Battles, which is a curious case because, first of all, it's divided into two different parts, this obviously being the vinyl version. But even if we talk about CD version, you will have these two sides here, you know, which are then again, well, more likely here rather, seeing these Disciples of the Ultimate Void and Infernal Battles. And it seems like this is put off two different sessions. I don't know what the official truth is, and as you noticed, this CD doesn't really reveal that much. But you have two different sound sets, like different production for these sides. And both are definitely raw black metal. And I kind of get it why this might be so much harder to digest than some newer Deathspell Omega, given that the overall sound is very, very raw and the approach is very primitive in so many ways. That is, the production is somewhat horrible in so many pair of ears. But then again, if you come from the 90s background, when it was more like given that early 80s stuff and early 90s stuff, that was all quite raw in all. I mean, if you listen to early Bathory ones, it's not like you end up listening to a hi-fi record. And that same applies to early Burzum, Immortal, bands such as that, especially Darkthrone, Ildiarn, and so forth. So very much Norwegian black metal style already reflected that you don't have to have this kind of a clean and nice production, and you can still get away with it as long as your music is good. That is, if the compositions, songs in English, if they are good, you will get on with it and nobody is gonna bitch about it. Because back then, so many people were listening to weary tapes with their cassette player, and it's not like the quality was high with the tapes nor the tape players or boom boxes. Anyway, even though this is very much a 2000 release, it still kind of is a strong link to these 1990s ways of creating black metal, and that's probably one of the main reasons why this appeals to me. Because when I was spinning this prior to making this review video, I was trying to get the feeling like which bands this reminds me mostly of when I'm listening to this. And basically 2 names, maybe 3 names pop up more than anything. And that is early Isengard, I'm talking about the black metal tracks on Höstmörke, also old Gorgoroth and Darkthrone. So all these kind of key bands of Norwegian black metal in the 1990s are very, very much resonating through Infernal Battles as well. But it's not like this is a copycat release. It stands very much on its own. And that makes this very much so enjoyable, because it's kind of Nordisk and at the same time it's very, very different scene altogether. And while this production is certainly very raw and primitive, I am one of those people, and I know there are plenty of you out there who just can enjoy the kind of a raw energy coming from within. And all those great riffs make their sense. I mean, I haven't been listening to this album for many, many years now, until now that is. And my first listen was like, okay, this wasn't maybe that good. I was remembering, like, has my taste kind of changed throughout the years? But after second spin, and especially after third and maybe fourth spin, I was really like, okay, maybe the initial response to this was a little bit off, because after a couple of spins more, I was like, yeah, this is as good as I remember it to be. So while not exactly original, comparing to the bands that had been going the same way in the early or mid-90s, this once again spoke to me in a way that I first fell in love with black metal. I mean, coming from a background of death metal and thrash metal and heavy metal. And when I found 1990s, black metal music, I wasn't worried about this kind of horrible production. I was first, a little bit off with the vocals, but when I started to like them, there was no gates to be, like, gates closed. I mean, it was all right, ready to get on with it. And so when this came to me around 2003, I was very much already been listening to this kind of stuff for many years now. And was no miracle that I started to like Infernal Battles right away. Because the thing here is, Deathspell Omega has some great songwriting, and all the puzzle pieces are right here, in a perfect order. Well, not in a perfect order maybe, but in a really, really good ways that this whole album is enjoyable. And because it lasts less than 40 minutes, it's not like it's gonna wear you down with its extra length or anything. It is a really good album that has definitely stood the test of time. And once again, in my opinion, this is one of the better ones ever to come from France. I know there are not many bands which I'm too much fan of coming from France. I mean, they have certainly a good amount of bands, but Deathspell Omega and maybe Nehemah are my favorite ones of all time coming from France, because of their very strong songwriting and good atmosphere, what this is all about. So, in case you missed it back in the days, now it's time to correct your mistakes. Go listen to some Infernal Battles and let you get the feeling of 20 years old French black metal. Thank you for watching. Should you have comments or opinions, put them on the comments box below and I will get back to you.